Hello, my name is Shirley Self, and I'm here today to talk astrology. And I want to talk about Mars. Mars right now, we see so much Mars around us. And Mars right now is in Pisces and has been crossing Neptune, and the ruler of Pisces. So the Mars we've been watching is a fairly nice Mars. It's very forgiving, and especially conjunct Neptune. And the conjunct Neptune, as Mars is in transit, the transiting Mars, the transiting Neptune. Conjunct the Neptune the way it is, we're dealing with the image of the warrior here. Mars is our warrior. And Mars in Pisces is a warrior image. Pisces, Neptune, having to do with the ideal, the image that we hold up, sort of a belief of the way we think it should be. So that when you combine the Mars and the Neptune, you got the image of the warrior. Now the image of the warriors come together, so it's a new image needs to be put forth. Let's look at the United States Mars Neptune square. This is the Sibley chart of the United States, the one that most people and I like the best. Let me move it a little. Okay. So Mars, our Mars here over here is a really critical spot. It's in the 7th house. It's on the cusp of the 7th house in Gemini, and the square the Neptune. And we are starting to feel our Neptune opposition that is happening. Transiting Neptune is about 20 degrees, 19, 20 degrees of Pisces right now. So getting ready to perfectly oppose this. So we're a lot of it, we're dealing with our image. Our image is suffering all over the world. And the image that we have to deal with first off is this image of the warrior. Understand that the image of the warrior has been with us forever. I mean, it's the samurai. It is. And it's been an image, myth that has tried to guide us into proper utilization of our Mars, because we are all warriors. I know if you're familiar with Dan Millman, but he writes about the peaceful warrior. I personally enjoyed Carlos Castaneda's discussions of the impeccable warrior. But we are warriors. Why? Because we have a Mars. Mars is our own is a weapon. It's our Mars is aggressive. It's necessary because we need an aggressive nature in order to survive. It's what goes out and gets what needs to be got. And so we all have this Mars, and the Mars in the United States, it gives us this image of a warrior that is kind of heavy duty. It's a square. Squares are not comfortable. Squares means you've got work to do. And we've got work to do on our self-image, as we are all warriors, and we know it, and we act like it. This image of the warrior, the samurai, High Noon, Gary Cooper and all, has deteriorated. It's called, the image has become decadent. And it is now the image of the 17-year-old who arms himself with an AK-47 and just goes out and takes out whomever. And that is obvious cry for us to own our own warrior and quit giving it up to the military, who have really hogged it. I mean, seriously, and they deservedly so. We live in a culture that does not have any initiation for young men, except the military. And so the military is, what initiation is supposed to do for boys is to grow them up so that they're no longer dependent, feel dependent on the mother, and to promote their Mars in a way that is productive, is good for the community. So that's the role of initiation. And I think for a long time, our war did that for us. Grew up, because what war will teach you is what's important. And that's what initiation is supposed to do, is to teach you on a whole higher level what's important. So we've got a lot of, we're all wounded. We're wounded by war. Our Chiron, our natal Chiron is in 20 Aries, in a house of getting our, using war to acquire land. This is the fourth house. This is house of land. And Chiron is where the nation is wounded. And the Mars in square the Neptune can carry a tremendous amount of guilt. And guilt, of course, screws it up. But it can't help it because it doesn't know what it's doing. It's virtually been lately living up to an ideal that is not leading it to the promised land. So it's time we started changing that ideal as we need to own our own Mars. Remember the card Strength. It's the one I like is a weight deck, and it's a card of the woman who's got her hand on the head of the lion, and the lion does not have a leash. And what that means is that she has controlled her animal, the Mars. She is controlling that animal, and there's I won't go into the lion. I will. I'm tempted, but not. Okay. So that's strength, and that's because strength is that path on the Kabbalah. If you'll remember, strength is that path between Mars and Jupiter. And so if you can use will, can overpower Mars. Will owns its own power. Will, the sun, owning its own Mars. And that's what that picture means. And if you can do that, you can access your Jupiter, which is your higher self, your your communication with all the higher and all the lower too, but all the higher knowledge. So that's our Mars, and that's why we need to really own our own Mars, because we need to take it back. People who've been carrying our Mars, our soldiers, our cops, even our firefighters and our doctors, been carrying our Mars, and it's doing them a great deal of harm. And the way we're reacting to that is obviously, it's time we gave up this projection. What you do is you project an energy that you don't know how to deal with or to want to deal with, and you put that on somebody who is obviously equipped to carry it, and they do. And they have been carrying our Mars for us, and it's time we owned our own Mars. And we're beginning this opportunity coming up to own our own Mars. And before I start talking about Mars going into Aries, I'll have a sip of water. So, Mars has been in Pisces. So we've been recognizing our guilt and talking about actually how we're going to deal with it. That's all part of this Neptune stuff going on. And the fact that Mars is Our natal Mars is this guilty Mars. This Mars that is not functional anymore. It's actually Mars, our own Mars. These are progressions. Progressions are a day for a year movement of the planets. And our Mars in 2006, about 2000, I'm not sure, but it seems to me, 2006 turned retrograde. It had been stationary for a long time, and we hadn't won any wars. And when Mars slows down before it starts really moving backwards, you know, all the planets do, they slow down, and that period can feel like they're, you know, they're stationary. It takes them forever to move a degree. So in that stationary period, we stopped losing wars, or stopped winning wars, started having stalemates. Now that Mars has turned directly in, we've actually started losing wars. And Mars turned inward shows the war that we are indulging in right now in this United States. Not just between the top and the bottom, economically, power-wise, etc., but side to side, me and my neighbor. And that Mars really needs, our Mars image really needs an update. What we need to do is to learn a little bit about Mars. We need to, each and every one of us, develop that strength card, that path between Mars and Jupiter that secures your access to higher knowledge and higher power. So, Mars is getting ready to move into Aries. And it's going to move into Aries at the end of June. And so it will be in Aries. It will be right here. Mars will be right here on the 4th of July, transiting Mars. And then Mars will move all the way over there. And notice that what it's going to be doing is it's not only going to be squaring our own natal planets, our very important natal planets, the stellium in Cancer, but the transiting planets, and we won't even talk about the progressed planets, but the transiting planets are over here. Our Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, South Node has moved into Sagittarius, and it's much easier. It's much easier. The karma to deal, I think, with Sagittarius, Gemini, it's communication. Any way you look at it, it's communication, and so all you have to do is focus that communication. We're focusing right now, South Node and Sagittarius, our communication on what our belief is. The North Node is in Gemini. Ask, talk, find out, do a little research. Just a little bit. It just takes a little bit. That's Gemini. Gemini doesn't want to do a lot, but it will do a little bit. So that's how we need to deal with our war. We need to come up with our own, each individual solution as to this war, and take a responsibility. Why can we do that? Because we're good people. We're good people. People are good. When you get down to the core of people, we are good. We are love. It's the meaning of Tifereth. The center of the Kabbalah is love. So, our Mars is moving into Aries. It'll be here for the 4th of July. And it will move to 28 degrees of Aries, squaring everybody, making a T-square with everybody. And then it will turn retrograde. I think it will turn retrograde. Let me see. That's September 9th at 28 Aries. And it will turn retrograde. Now, the problem, as we've noticed with our own Mars, which has turned retrograde, that what was difficult before becomes quite problematical. So, we're going to find that as Mars stations, things will virtually stop happening in the right direction. And as it turns retrograde, the backside of this is going to come out. Mars retrograde, as we've noticed. Arms 17-year-old killing whoever. Mars retrograde is faithless and plays dirty. So our Mars was turned retrograde, and as here's what's let me back it. I've got to bring in Chiron, our own Chiron. Now let me explain Chiron. Chiron is our wounded healer, and it is that image that you have of the human head and torso on a horse. That's the wound. That's healer. That's Chiron. And so this wound is really interesting because the wound is in mythology, and therefore it is true. Pay attention to it because it's telling you something. In mythology, the wound is what puts the hero, opens the door to the hero's journey. The wound, and that's what this is. This is Chiron. Chiron is our wound, is in Aries, that war that we won for our land. It's the basic wound, the war we won for our riches. It's a basic wound. Slavery and the extermination of the Indians. Those are those wounds that are surfacing right now. They're running open and bleeding, and we've met them as people of guilt, as people have started talking about reparations, the Neptune opposition. Remember, this Neptune is guilt. It's obviously guilt. And so we've already been talking about how do you repay this terrible debt? The Chiron is, first one has to recognize the wound. And that's the Chiron. And as Mars moves in, I think in mid-July, it will conjunct and move past transiting Chiron. Transiting Chiron's about, I think it's about in a degree of our nodes. Now, pay attention to any planet that you've got, natal planet that you've got, in the degree of the nodes. That means it has karmic impact. So you got to pay attention to what goes on with that planet, because it's will tell you about the nature of your karma. It will help you deal with your karma, or to make it worse, whichever. So, and where was I? Oh, Chiron. So Chiron is, first we have to acknowledge the wound. And that means each of us, because Mars is in Aries, each of us carries a guilt. Guilt's hard on people. It's corrosive. So Chiron will give us the opportunity to acknowledge our guilt. And once we've acknowledged it, then, then we'll have to talk out how to deal with it. We'll be having a T-square, Neptune opposite, Neptune square, Mars. What an opportunity we're having. So, as Mars, remember that Mars will turn retrograde September 9th. And Mars is the dirty fighter, so we've got issues with Mars in during our election period. And I'm not just talking about lying. I'm talking about a real dirty fighter. And we have to watch out for that. We have to arm ourselves against that. And be willing to use whatever weapon we can find to make sure that our rights, our voting rights, are safe. And anyway, like I say, watch out for the Mars. And it will cross this Mars, or this Chiron, once again. It will cross it going forward, and it'll cross it coming backward, and go back to 15 degrees of Aries, and then it will go cross it again. So we'll have an awful lot. Chiron's going to be talking to us an awful lot, as Neptune is. They're talking loud and clear to our Mars. our Mars. Let's look at our progressions here. These are the progressions that we'll have there for 2020. Our birthday this isn't our birthday yet. This is moon phase 25. I'm very heartened by that. A moon phase 25 actually is the use of accumulated power. And so it can be very dangerous to us, because Pluto, as we know, is making its laying its heavy hand on us. And Mars is supposed to rule epidemics. I think that Pluto rules pandemics. Pluto, as you know, probably know, is the higher component, higher octave of Mars. So, these are the progressions of the United States for virtually for the coming election year time. I don't have in the transits. I get confused if there's too much information. But so the midheaven of our progressed chart, the progressed this, has progressed to a year 2020, July 4th. And that progressed midheaven has come to Gemini at 4 degrees of Gemini, which puts that, and our progressed Uranus, you think, where's Uranus been all these years? It hasn't gone anywhere. It's been retrograde for a long time. And so it's virtually come back to its natal position, which is the possibility of freedom that we seek. This is our mask. We are seeking this. We are seeking to own this. This is our will. Our will is actually ruled by this Jupiter, which has been perverted because it's so close to Venus there in our chart, has kind of been perverted to everybody wants to be a rich man. But that Jupiter is in Cancer. And so the stellium in Cancer wants to take care of who? It wants to take care of other people. That means that I look at you and you are that other person I want to take care of. Are you doing okay? Got a place to live? Need some break? And that's what that, but we also have this image up here in Jupiter's house, the 9th house of image of Sagittarius. It's the Sagittarius usually is here. We've got Neptune, our image, the myth of the gunfighter. And so other people see that in us. That's the way they see us. That we live in the Wild West. Sagittarius is the West. And it rules cowboys, the wide open spaces. So, the world is seeing us as this, has seen this as this Sagittarius. This rich man, and we are rich. Ooh, we are so rich. But Uranus has now come to our midheaven. And that means things change. Uranus never leaves things the way they were when. Of course, all the planets have an effect. All the planets will make little tweaks in your life. Attitude, whatever. Uranus on the midheaven says things will never go back the way they were. And our midheaven has come is coming to Uranus. And Uranus is staying put and waiting for it. So that's change. And that's revolutionary. And what's interesting is that if we can own this Mars, our warrior, and do the Uranus thing on the cusp of the 7th house. Now, wherever Uranus is, it's going to be made itself felt, and all you can do is adjust to it. Uranus is a hard ass. It is uncompromising. It's not Saturn. Saturn is compromising. But Uranus is not compromising. It has to be exactly what it wants or nothing at all. So we need to learn to let other people be who they are. And they're different. And if we quit being Rome and making the world safe for our merchants, and trust that our riches, Pluto, we've got Pluto in our house of riches. Pluto also rules plutocracy, which is tromping around in our riches. We have riches. We have much to offer. We have a lot to offer people. We insist on locking up our intellectual territory so that it's not of use to other people. We want paid. We want paid. We're supposed to be more of a giving country than a getting country. Over there is Leo with a north node. It's in money houses. Our nodes are in money houses. That's kind of difficult. And over here, our money house says, I don't care about you. And that's Uranus at its worst. I don't care about you. And we have a moon here that also indulges in this, I don't have to care about you. The moon does care, but I don't have to care about you. Saturnian. Aquarius is one of the rulers, the old ruler of Aquarius was Saturn. Or Uranus is, I don't care what you think. Uranus rules Aquarius. So the south node here just doesn't give a damn. The north node here cares. It's in the house of love. It's in a house of sex, actually. It's in the house of other people's money. It's in the house of being a source of money for other people, of helping other people to feed themselves and not judging them. This is a house of judgment, and we very much judge them. It's ruled by this moon or this Venus in Cancer, this house of judgment and health. This house of judgment ruled by this Venus is ruled by that Mars that, well, it has an image to keep, and we're busy changing that image right now. I think there's going to be a lot of blowback, especially when Mars goes retrograde in Aries. Mars usually spends about 6 weeks in a sign. Mars in Aries, and remember Mars rules Aries, and it's spontaneous, and it's selfish, self-centered, and because it's self-centered, it will be we will be fighting for our share of responsibility and pie in this country, and because responsibility for how our money is spent. This is our money houses. So responsibility is coming upon us, and we've got not only a coronavirus, in which we're discovering that certain people who have been very much underappreciated and abused are more important than we thought they were. At these times, our young men and women are rightly, you notice that Mars is going to run all the way up to the cusp of children, activate the children, then back off and show Chiron again, and square everybody, saying your priorities suck. Your priorities have sucked for thousands of years. And it's true. But for thousands of years we've been teaching Mars to own its own power and to be aware of how it's used. And I think we're there now. And I think we can, in the United States, own our own Mars. You own yours and I'll own mine. I've had to own mine. Mine is unaspected and will shoot off of it at a moment's thought. So let me, what else did I want to tell you about Mars? Oh, it's individual power. It's individual power versus big money. And versus, because look at us, we're in debt. We're in debt. We're not doing our North Node. We do our South Node. Our money is held here by the plutocracy in our house of money. And we're over here like we don't care or something. Pisces caring, noticing that you're without. That's coming up. So what we can do for our warriors is to give them something to fight for. You think about Mars turning retrograde in 2006, and it'd been, like I said, stationary, and we hadn't done anything except beat our heads against a brick wall for a long time, because Mars was stationary for what it felt to us like was, well, for us in repercussions, was years. Mars turned retrograde in 2006, and wants us to fix us. Wants us to fix us. And it means virtually showing, virtually demonstrating what's wrong with our Mars. And boy, we're doing that. But if we can give our young men and women something worth fighting for, and it seems to me that climate change, our world, is worth fighting for. A war worth fighting. You know, if we've been using war for initiation, the last few years have not been very initiating. And I think it has been very wounding for our warriors. And it has caused them to ramp up their war, like you see the cops are now all wearing anonymous Darth Vader gear. So I think if we give our young men the encouragement, our young women encouragement, that they will become warriors for our own survival. And I think that's worth fighting for. But we're going to have to face a war with big money. And I think that's a war worth fighting for, too. What we need in this country is some Sagittarius, some hope that we can. And we can. We got the chops. We need to learn to focus. And that's about all I have to tell you about Mars. It's going to be pretty interesting. I think things could turn, like I say, Mars is going to move out of Pisces soon, and therefore not be ruled by Neptune. But by then I think we'll have acknowledged our guilt quite fully. When we start moving through Aries, then we can start fixing it. Anyway, be brave, be good warriors, be impeccable. Good night.